CNN is the first network inside Iran since the start of the war with the U.S. and Israel with the government's permission there in Iran. And this morning, CNN's Fred Pleitgen sat down for an exclusive interview with a top Iranian official, the foreign policy advisor to the office of the supreme leader. Fred Pleitgen is in Tehran. And just a note, as I mentioned, CNN operates in Iran with the permission of the government there as required under local regulations, but maintains full editorial control over what it reports.
So let's check in on CNN because some pretty strange things have been happening ever since the network effectively sold itself out to the Iranian government. On one hand, we have many of their major hosts attempting to convert their TV shows into podcasts, basically assuming that, oh, that's what the kids are watching. So if we put a microphone right here, Americans will magically assume that we're credible people and not a fake news organization. I'm not exactly sure what this is supposed to accomplish. I find it to be utterly bizarre, but you have that on one hand. And then secondly, many of their characters are now attempting to run damage control and claim that they are not actually running Iranian state propaganda, which we've broken down in the past. They actually are. Okay. And that is 100% what is happening. And I find it pretty interesting that this is often coinciding with overwhelmingly negative news coverage of the conflict, basically trying to undermine the American war effort. And you could try to spin that as honest journalism, if not for the fact that you've already admitted your network is running propaganda for the other side in this conflict. But, you know, it's very interesting. A lot of strange sort of damage control attempts currently happening. And this is, of course, all existing behind the backdrop of CNN set to undergo a major merger very soon, which is to say that the network is about to be bought by what they're referring to as a pro-MAGA billionaire. And so if you really were to be honest, what is happening right now is all of these characters are attempting to save their job, right? Basically, oh, don't fire me. Maybe if I turn the show into a podcast and look like independent media, the ratings will go up 1%, and then Jake Tapper gets to keep his job. Or Brian Stelter, right, one of the more obviously partisan liberals on the network, but still claiming to be a real journalist, is going to argue, no, I wasn't being an Iranian propagandist. That's not true. I don't frankly think that a lot of this is going to work, but nonetheless, we'll discuss the current situation here today, again, both as it pertains to Iran and the bigger picture here of how the network is about to change hands here very soon. So we'll get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, given what we've spoken about thus far, take a listen to how defensive CNN is currently getting over the claim that they're effectively, again, running anti-American propaganda throughout this conflict.
He really seems to be fuming about how the Iran war is being covered by the American media. Quite frankly, Trump does not want the scrutiny. He would prefer a propagandistic, pliant press in the United States. But he's not going to get that. He's not getting that, and so he's fuming on Truth Social about it. He posted an unusually long message. I think we can put the whole thing up on screen. And in it, Trump accurately points out that pro-Iran social media accounts have been posting lies and fake AI-generated videos to make it seem like the Iranian military is mightier than it really is. So that is a real phenomenon. It's really happening. CNN and the New York Times have debunked those pro-Iran regime lies. But then Trump suggests that some real news outlets have been running the pro-Iran videos and acting like they're real, running these AI-generated videos. He suggests maybe it's even treasonous to show those videos. And I've got to tell you, Jessica, I have not seen any U.S. news outlets that have fallen for those videos. To the contrary, real news outlets are debunking those lies. But Trump sounds confused by the chaotic information environment. It is chaotic out there. And
so that's, of course, what CNN claims. They're just doing journalism. It's fair, objective coverage. They're not running propaganda. They're not spreading some of these AI hoax videos, to which I say, it doesn't matter if you're not spreading those hoaxes, you're still spreading hoaxes of your own, and effectively you are running propaganda. The reason we have said that from the beginning is, let's repeat, CNN is the only Western news outlet that has been reporting from within Iran, which is to say the Iranian government granted media access to CNN. Now, bear in mind, Iran is not a free country with freedom of the press. They have not allowed any other Western outlet into the hostile regime besides CNN. Now, CNN has graciously accepted the invite. They claim that, oh, well, sure, we're reporting with government permission, but we're still having full editorial control. To which I ask the question, how could it possibly be the case that of all of the media outlets that probably would have liked to go and see the situation in the country, it was CNN and CNN alone that the Iranian regime trusted to do the coverage for them. Now, we obviously know Iran would like to grant access to Western media only for the sake of themselves, right? Only for the sake of running their own state propaganda. So to CNN, the supposedly real media, the real news, as Brian Stelter claims, I think that's a really honest question they have to answer for themselves before saying, oh, well, it's just journalism. Why wouldn't you go into the country if you were given the chance? Please answer me. What were the terms of that agreement, by the way? How did that all happen? And how are you going to slander or lambaste Trump or any American, frankly, for questioning the credibility of your coverage of a foreign conflict while it's become very clear you are literally a foreign asset for the foreign government here involved, right? You are state media for the other side. We know that to be a fact.
Taking a quick break for a coffee along the way. We've been driving for several hours. There's a couple of things that we've noticed. Number one is that, first of all the shops are open. All the shops are really well stocked, even with fresh things like, for instance, fruits and vegetables. Coffee, obviously, also available as well. And then also the gas stations. There's no long lines as gas stations. Fuel seems readily available, and you just don't see any sort of degree of panic anywhere. Iran has a new supreme leader. What does that mean for your military effort and the confrontation with the United States and Israel?
That means the system is quite functioning.
So the United States says it's drastically degraded the Iranian military, the capabilities as far as missiles is concerned, drones is concerned. How much longer can you do this?
That is one of the false narratives that the United States government is producing.
So your side is ready for a long war if the United States and Israel choose that. Do you consider this an existential threat to the Islamic Republic?
It is an existential threat to the Islamic Republic, and therefore we have to stay with full might.
Yeah, totally real news coverage, by the way. 100% real journalism, according to Brian Stelter. How could Trump or any American possibly cast doubts on what they're watching right now? Sure. And the reason I bring that up is because you watch something like that. You watch CNN, by the way, go on air and admit this is Iranian state propaganda. And if you ask me, it has to greatly undermine the credibility and trust that we can have in mainstream media when it comes to their coverage of this conflict, particularly in stories like this one right here. How many times have you seen these releases from CNN or the Washington Post or something where you have a story that says, an unnamed source within the Pentagon is stating that there's total panic, or Iran is winning, or Trump has no plan about the Strait of Hormuz, so on and so forth. And again, understanding, we're watching an outlet that is simultaneously running propaganda for the foreign government and has been given clearance and access to do so. I'm sorry, but when you're going to run these anonymously sourced stories, we have to greatly question, frankly, the credibility and where that's actually coming from. And the fact that, by the way, some of these supposed anonymously sourced stories have been completely debunked, which is to say what? The mainstream media is actually running propaganda. And you can say all you want about how, oh, well, we're not pushing the Iranian AI hoax videos. You don't have to, because you're pushing hoaxes of your own, including ones like this right here.
They're confused, and we know it. Our response, we will keep pressing. We will keep pushing, keep advancing. No quarter, no mercy for our enemies. Yet some in this crew, in the press, just can't stop. Allow me to make a few suggestions. People look up at the TV and they see banners, they see headlines. I used to be in that business, and I know that everything is written intentionally. For example, a banner or a headline, Mideast war intensifies, splashing on the screen the last couple of days, alongside visuals of civilian or energy targets that Iran has hit, because that's what they do. What should the banner read instead? How about Iran increasingly desperate? Because they are. They know it, and so do you, if it can be admitted. Or more fake news from CNN. Reports that the Trump administration underestimated the Iran war's impact on the Strait of Hormuz. Patently ridiculous, of course. For decades, Iran has threatened shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. This is always what they do, hold the strait hostage. CNN doesn't think we thought of that. It's a fundamentally unserious report. The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better.
The Pentagon is disputing a CNN report that claims a recent internal assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency that was circulating inside the Pentagon in recent weeks determined that Iran could potentially keep the passage shut for anywhere from 1 to 6 months. Chief spokesman Sean Parnell writes the DIA is one of many intelligence agencies at the Pentagon that plans for the very worst possible outcome. The 6-month closure of the Strait of Hormuz is an impossibility and completely unacceptable to the Secretary of War.
Now, sure, you could try to argue about this story that the Pentagon is trying to run cover for itself, but the reason I cite it in particular is because of just how utterly ridiculous what CNN is trying to argue actually is. Because, you know, on one hand, you notice how they cite that intelligence report completely out of context. Oh yeah, worst case scenario, Iran could close the strait for 1 to 6 months. By the way, that's largely kind of barring actual US or NATO-backed intervention to secure the strait. But CNN's basically publishing it, written in a context sounding like that's what the United States government believes is going to happen. That's not what they believe is going to happen. By the way, you really believe Donald Trump would allow the Strait of Hormuz to be closed for 6 months? Give me a freaking break. So you have that on one hand. But then secondly, okay, the assumption here or the inference is what? Essentially that Trump went into a war with Iran without considering the Strait of Hormuz, as if the Strait of Hormuz has been core to any U.S. war planning in that part of the world for several decades by now. As if, by the way, Iran didn't temporarily close the Strait of Hormuz as recently as the Biden administration. But you mean to tell me we're supposed to believe the Pentagon just had no clue? Oh, they're closing the Strait of Hormuz, guys. What's going on? By the way, why do you think it is that Trump made an intentional point to largely hold back from attacking Iran's energy infrastructure? You know, you think that's exactly an accident? Why do you think it is, by the way, a big reason why they wanted to target the ballistic missiles so bad, guys? It's not just because of what they'll do to Israel or U.S. bases. We know Trump is heavily, almost maniacally obsessed with the price of energy and cheap oil and gas prices for Americans. It's core to his whole agenda. But we're supposed to believe the administration magically overlooked the Strait of Hormuz. I don't really buy the story. But notice you're seeing a lot of these, okay? And while I can't personally confirm which are true and which are not, I'm just going to point out a pattern. We've seen a ton of these stories of negative news coming out of allegedly the Pentagon that just cite these anonymous, unnamed sources. And again, given the fact we've established CNN is running Iranian state propaganda, it really does raise questions as to the credibility or the believability of these supposed real news outlets when they're running stories that are either missing context, citing questionable or even potentially sources that don't exist, and et cetera, et cetera.
U.S. responsible for missile on school. So where are the headlines, 50 Iranian ships sunk, or Iranian military assets destroyed, or leadership tries to put on good showing despite internal chaos, or Khomeini appointment creates hereditary theocracy, war plan progress unprecedented? Well, those stories should be told, not because they're pro-Trump hype, but because they're accurate. But CNN seems hell-bent on framing almost every development as a negative. When the current Iranian regime needs optimistic framing, it knows where to go.
For the Iranians, as long as they are there, as long as their leadership structure is still effective and still very much intact, is stable, and as long as they have that leverage in the Persian Gulf area, they believe that they can hold out for an extended period of time. And when you go out on the streets in Tehran, one of the things that you do notice is that there are a lot of security forces on the ground, and where they are also internally projecting that they are still very much in charge and still very much have that grip on power.
By the way, folks, let's be real about this. The mainstream media has been doing this for the last several decades of American history. I think what you're watching right now is not all that different from what they did in Vietnam, which I think, frankly, is misremembered by most Americans, even many on the right wing. Okay, because it's the same type of behavior. You have Walter Cronkite, goes to Vietnam in 1968. He reports on the Tet Offensive, and because it's an invasion, there's a lot of intense fighting, he's just, oh, I'm so shocked by this, wow. And then it comes back and reports to Americans arbitrarily that he declared famously what? It was an unwinnable war for America. That was never true. Okay, it was never the case. We were, much like Iran right now, we were decimating them conventionally. The kill ratio of Americans versus VC and NVA was utterly off the charts. It was insane. The war was always 100% winnable for America, but what was the point of that? The media was going to misrepresent what was happening on the ground, take it wildly out of context, because it is true, right? It's the first time Americans ever really saw war on television, and then the supposed most trusted name in news at the time, Walter Cronkite, who turned out later in his life to be a massive liberal, sound familiar, by the way, to what you're watching right now in CNN, basically went there with the sole intent of undermining and destroying the war effort. That's exactly what they did. And then, by the way, how effective was it in history? How is Vietnam even remembered today? It is remembered as the unwinnable war, even though that is not true. Now, there was always from the beginning a very fair conversation to be had about, say, the political costs, the human costs of the war. Was it strategically necessary for America? Would it have made more sense to get involved, say, in Cuba or something closer to home? Those are fair debates to be had, as, by the way, I would argue they're fair debates about the Iran war. But notice how the media takes that one step further. They just try to say, oh, the other side is winning. The other side's not winning. But notice how they always do this type of stuff to make our country look weak, to make our military look weak, and ultimately do what? Demoralize the American population to turn them against what is happening for whatever reason. It could be because they lean liberally politically. It could be because they just root for the other side, or maybe just for clickbait and getting ratings. Who knows? But that is the same behavior we are watching time and time again, And you could argue to a degree it's kind of treasonous. But here's my point, is that okay, so what? They undermine Iran, sure. They are basically trying to maybe force us to pull out sooner than we should strategically. I get all that, sure. But imagine the point at which, let's say hypothetically in the future, we have to fight, let's say, like a real war. Let's say, for example, China-Taiwan, something very big, almost catastrophic, World War III in nature. How on earth do you think we would ever last through that conflict with this type of media, with a media of the hostile press that is just from day one working against the war effort? Make a long story short, we wouldn't. Imagine this media, for example. Imagine having CNN during World War II, where, that was a war where it was really grueling and actually long, okay? We were involved with that basically 4 years. Hundreds of thousands of Americans died. By the way, we lost a lot of battles. We lost a lot of men, a lot of battles. It was not this straightforward thing, okay, for sure. It was not just a war right now that's lasting about 3 to 4 weeks. How would we have ever gotten through that, right? And honestly, it's a real concern because, I think we'll get through this just fine. But imagine the point in the future where America has to actually use its military for real, right? We might win the battle conventionally, who knows? But the media would try to make it seem like the opposite. And then, what would happen next? Honestly, that's a serious conversation that needs to be had. But yeah, again, to make a long story short, I think it's very clear you're watching from the media right now a concerted effort to undermine the war effort, okay? Again, they're not just talking about the political or economic costs. They're trying to frame this idea that the U.S. military is somehow losing to Iran on a conventional basis, which is just simply not. That is not true. But that's what they're trying to give you the perception, because what are they fundamentally doing here? Lying, ladies and gentlemen. Now, that said, I think a big source for some of the recent panic and excuses coming out of this network is, of course, the fact, or maybe they're trying to do their last hurrah, who knows, by selling out to Iran, is coming amidst the fact that we know that CNN is set to merge with Paramount, and supposedly the person now who's going to be in charge of the network is MAGA aligned or MAGA friendly, and you can tell a lot of these people are very concerned they may be losing their jobs here very soon. Take a listen.
But I can tell you, Ellison has talked in recent months about how he wants to sustain the news business in the United States. And he's talked about his belief that, quote, the majority of the country longs for news that is balanced and is fact-based. And Wolf, that sure sounds a lot like CNN's mission. A lot of similarities here.
So yeah, clearly Brian and some of these people sound a little bit nervous about the possibility they might be losing their jobs due to CNN's incoming ownership. But you're also seeing at the same time, there's not a lot of clear intent to actually change their behavior. They're going to continue to be the propaganda outlet they always have been. And as I said, some of the comparisons you could make to the current moment with the press in Vietnam right now are just striking, right? Turns out this stuff has never changed. And I even think about something like Kent State, Okay, this is gonna be really controversial, I know, but because I was taught, for example, in school, that Kent State was just a massacre of a bunch of innocent, peaceful protesters because that's the way the media framed it. And when you actually delve into the true story there, turns out there was a lot more to it than that. Okay, there's violent rioters. They, the night before, burned down an ROTC building on the campus of Kent State. The day of, the National Guard tried to get them to disperse. They were spraying tear gas, and then the protesters start chucking heavy rocks at the National Guard and all this stuff. And it's this mass confusion event, and some shots go off. And then, again, they framed it as this just massacre of innocent, peaceful protesters. That's not what happened. But, oh, by the way, I remember something in the media just a month before this conflict broke out that was very similar, right? The supposed massacring of innocent, peaceful protesters that weren't doing anything. Turns out the media has always been sort of the enemy of this country. I'm just saying, right? Goes back a long way, is all I'm going to state about that. But anyways, so there you have Brian Stelter. And then on the other hand, we have characters like Jake Tapper here who are attempting to convert their shows into podcasts or whatever this is. I repeat, a desperate attempt for ratings to impress the new boss or something. It's utterly bizarre, but take a look.
So you're probably wondering what's going on, why we're in my office for the first hour of the lead today. So it's an experiment. This is my actual desk where I do my actual work, not the desk in the studio. And we thought we would bring you into the space where me and my team do our actual journalism and plan the show every day. So here we are giving it a shot. You might also be wondering about the decor, the posters and the kerchiefs and such on my wall. Well, the theme is these are all losing presidential campaigns. And this hobby started 26 years ago after I covered my very first presidential campaign in the year 2000. Campaigning and hopping from bus to plane to bus to plane, I collected the lawn signs and posters of all the candidates I covered. And by the end of the election, I had a really great collection of, well, losers. And there's an autographed Gore Lieberman one from 2000. So anyway, this all became a hobby. Here, come back to me here. You'll see this is one of the grand achievements in my collection. It's an Al Smith poster. He lost in 1928. Democrat to Herbert Hoover. Republicans, too, on the wall here. And from the modern era, there's autographed Romney and Ryan from 2012, autographed McCain, Palin from 2008. The oldest one in the corner there, 1844, that's Henry Clay of the Whigs. And beneath that, you have the 2000 butterfly ballot voting booth and a Jake Tapper Muppet from a viewer.
Yeah, as I said, utterly bizarre. Now, will it save their jobs? I guess that remains to be seen. I wouldn't keep very high hopes that the Jake Tapper Muppet or the Al Smith campaign poster is going to make a huge difference here. I don't think it's going to magically make the ratings go up. I don't think it's going to distract people from some of the ridiculous news coverage that they're seeing. But hey, we'll see. We'll find out. That said, though, let me know your thoughts on all of this, guys, in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.